Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another book video. I absolutely love talking about books with you. Nothing fills me with more joy than when I recommend a really good book and then I get tagged in tweets and Instagram stories of your purchases and your reviews. It is just my absolute favourite interaction to have on the internet. If my legacy can just be that I always recommend the best books, then I'll be pretty damn happy with that. A month or so ago I uploaded a video where I shared my absolute favourite fictional, psychological thriller / mystery, crime books with you, and I promised that a non-fiction true crime book video would be coming, so here we go. I don't tend to read as much non-fiction as I do fiction. Reading is kind of an escape from the dumpster fire that is the world for me, so I rarely tend to reach for non-fiction books in my me time. However, doing what I do here on the internet, I quite often turn to non-fiction true crime books for research. I've got a few physical books to share with you, but I actually often find it's easier for me to listen to true crime, non-fiction stuff on audiobooks via Audible most of the time, which is how I've absorbed most of these recommendations I'm going to give you. Also, full disclosure, the majority of these are straight up true crime books, but there are a couple of crimey history books in there as well. Also, make sure you follow me over on Goodreads if you want to see what I'm reading in live time. I'll leave a link to it down below. I update Goodreads all the time. And I would like to thank Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Surfshark is a VPN, an app and a browser extension that basically lets you access the internet as if you're in any country in the world. It lets you access and unblock websites that might not usually be available wherever you are. I've spoken of my frustrations before of trying to access articles for research and coming across the roadblock of this page is not available in your region. You find the same with a lot of YouTube videos as well, but with Surfshark I can simply change my location over to the USA or wherever in the world I need to be, and voila, I have full access to all of the information I need. Also, I've been spending a lot of time on Netflix USA, but I thought I'd travel down under this week and have a look at what Australian Netflix offers, and I was so excited, to see they still have Pretty Little Liars on there, which I've been really missing ever since they sneakily took it away from the UK, so it's really nice to finally get my PLL fix. Sometimes you just need rubbish TV. And I also found some of my favourite movies on there. They have Call Me By Your Name, they have Mean Girls, which is just a classic, and Bad Mums, which makes me cry with laughter every single time I watch it. I'm sure I've said it before, but just browsing different Netflixes around the world is now one of my favourite pastimes. I just spend so many hours just browsing Netflixes. Surfshark also adds an extra layer of security when you're online to keep all your passwords, photos, videos and personal information safe, as well as giving you a way to stay generally safe and anonymous online. You can never be too careful. Surfshark is the only VPN to offer one account to use on an unlimited number of devices, and I personally love it because it's so easy to use. You can use my code Marie to get 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's absolutely no risk. If you try it and it's not for you, it's no problem at all. I'll link it in the top line description box down below if you want to go check it out. But anyway, let's talk books. So first up we have what is often thought to be the first true crime non-fiction novel, an absolute classic, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I came across this book whilst I was researching for my video on the Clutter family murders. I had heard of In Cold Blood before but always just assumed it was a fiction book, so I was very surprised to find out that it was actually about the Clutter family. If you didn't watch that video or you just happened to be coming across this video, hi. The Clutter family murders refers to the 15th of November 1959 in the small town of Holcomb in Kansas, where 4 members of the Clutter family were brutally murdered at gunpoint, all found in separate rooms. Some were tied up, some were not. There was just no motive for the crime. Everyone really liked the Clutter family, they had a really good reputation, but the case was eventually solved though, and this book is just super interesting because it follows in the footsteps of the murderers before the crime happened, as well as obviously talking about the Clutter family. This reads like a fiction novel, like you'd think that this wasn't real. It's so well written, except it is real. Everything in this book really happened. The fact that it talks so in depth about the perpetrators as well as the victims just makes for an incredibly layered story. And Capote doesn't just stick to the stuff we know, he does fictionalise some conversations because of course there's no way of knowing what was actually said at some point, but it's just amazing. And at no point does that veer the story, of course, it still stays very relevant. A bit of fun trivia about this book is rumour has it that Capote actually got way too close to one of the murderers, Perry Smith, whilst interviewing him for this book, because obviously he had to get super close to him to convince him to share a lot of personal information. And a lot of people accuse Capote of developing feelings for Smith, which could potentially be why the novel feels so personal, but nobody knows the truth, I suppose, apart from Capote. But they definitely had a real sincere relationship, which I think just adds a really interesting layer to this book. I mean, it's a classic without a doubt, highly recommend. Apologies if I sound really croaky and gross in this video. I'm recovering from a horrible cold that I had last week. Like, all of this part of my face just like swelled and blocked. It was horrible. I haven't had a cold in all of lockdown and it's been so nice, and then as soon as life begins to like have any resemblance of normality, I just get ill again, because of course I did. So excuse me if I'm a bit croaky and I feel like I can't speak properly, but I'm really trying. I feel like I've mentioned this book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, in so many different videos, but it just wouldn't be right if I didn't include it in this one as well. This is the story of the Golden State Killer, who at the time of writing this book was unidentified, but we now know to be Joseph D'Angelo. Michelle McNamara, the author of this, dedicated all of her time to attempting to solve this case, which was pretty much unknown by the public before she began to draw attention to it. I've said many a time this is an incredible book. Like, the way that Michelle is able to set the scene of each crime just blows me away. The research that she put in for this is just impeccable. She goes into so much detail about each individual crime, and I think it's for this reason that I struggled to read this so much. Everything in this book is so vivid that it's not exactly something that you can just blast through in a couple of days. It took me a couple of years actually to finish this. It's just so graphic, but it's incredible. Like, that doesn't make it any less amazing. It's so good, it's just a lot. I was only able to do like a chapter at a time of this because it was just such an intense read, and obviously I'm somebody who deals with a lot of true crime stories in my day-to-day life. Just the investigative journalism that went into this book is everything I aspire to be. It's amazing. This next one, you could argue, isn't necessarily true crime, but the contents of it definitely delves into the criminal. It's just a different take at true crime. This is And the Band Played On by Randy Shilts. The tagline is Politics, People and the AIDS Epidemic. This is a chunky book with teeny tiny writing, and I'm not going to lie to you and say that I've read every single page of this. I've delved into huge chunks of it and I've read most of it, but again, it's something that I'm really taking my time with reading. You need patience for this one. There's just a lot in it. Sometimes the contents and the topics make me so angry that I just have to put it down. But I've definitely read enough of it that I can recommend it in good conscience. Again, it's just an outstanding piece of investigative journalism that looks into the 80s AIDS crisis in the USA, although it does explore other areas of the world as well in relation to AIDS. This book just highlights the many ways in which the USA government failed when it came to the AIDS epidemic. It was dismissed as the gay disease, gay cancer, like that made it anything less worthy of paying attention to. It talks about Reagan's failures as president, how he tried to dismiss the CDC's advice because he didn't like what they said. There are actually a lot of parallels that could be made to the USA circumstances today, now I'm saying it out loud. It talks about the race to a cure once people realised that AIDS wasn't just a gay disease, and how there was also just this shit show of one-upmanship. The whole thing, this whole book, is just infuriating. The AIDS crisis makes my blood boil, and this book just emphasises all of the anger I feel about it. Yeah, not technically true crime, but crime nonetheless. Possibly one of the biggest crimes of our time that led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, and this book talks about all of it. And that's it for the physical copies I've got to show you, so I don't know what I'm going to do with my hands the rest of this video. The rest I all read either on my Kindle or listened to on Audible. So I read The Lighthouse, The Mystery of the Eilean Lighthouse Keepers by Kevin McCloskey whilst I was researching my video on the Flannan Isles Lighthouse mystery, and this was one that I just absolutely devoured. It was quite a short read if I remember correctly, and I finished it in just a few hours. If you haven't heard of this case before, 3 lighthouse keepers on a rock off the coast of Scotland disappeared. Like, it's just an enduring mystery, including very strange and mysterious logbook entries, bad-tempered men, missing clothing, and an unlit lighthouse. It's quite a quick book, it's very to the point, but very informative nonetheless, which is sometimes just the thing you need when you're trying to research for a video. I don't want any of the fluff, I just want to focus on the actual story, and this book focuses on what it means to be a lighthouse keeper, the conditions they found themselves in on the rock, and then it delves into the theories around this case, some crazy, some not so crazy. I found it's really well researched, which I'd say is the most important thing in a true crime book. The Search for the Green River Killer by Carlton Smith is one that I found to be invaluable whilst researching my video on Gary Ridgway. If you're into serial killers, which I assume you are if you're watching this video on my channel, then this is an absolute must read, or must listen I suppose. The most interesting thing about this is that it was actually written before Gary Ridgway was caught, which adds a really nice non-biased voice to the book. Or maybe non-biased isn't quite the right word here. Basically, there's no leaning in any direction. It doesn't focus on Gary as a person and why he personally did the things that he did. It talks about the killer as if it could have been anyone and mostly focuses on the search for the Green River Killer. Not even so much on the victims and their individual stories, although obviously it does talk to an extent about that. It mostly focuses on the search. I'm always really interested in the process behind criminal investigations. I love to see the investigative techniques, and this book really focuses on that, and it was just super interesting to me. It talked about how underfunded the investigation was, and it's super frustrating in hindsight knowing that Gary Ridgway was a killer, because at some point it feels like the investigation gets so close, but it's never just quite there. I would recommend doing this one as an audiobook. There's a lot of names, a lot of victims. I think it would probably get quite confusing reading it. But the audiobook did quite a good job at distinguishing between each character and each voice, and it was just really easy to follow. Manson, The Life and Times of Charles Manson by Jeff Gwynne is a book that I actually found super refreshing, because most accounts of Manson and his life seem to focus on how charming and charismatic he was, but this book depicted him as he really was, which was a delusional manipulator. He was just a weird guy who sometimes always managed to tell people exactly what they wanted to hear. This book covers his entire life, birth, childhood, incarceration, his music career, and of course the Manson family. And it also does a really good job at capturing the whole 70s thing. It just sets up the scene really well. You feel like you're there at some points. Sometimes I find non-fiction books really hard to get through. They just don't have that real page-turner shock value thing. I need to read a 500-page book. But there's something about this book that really kept me going. I just didn't want to put it down, and I know that most people's go-to when wanting a book about Manson is Vincent Bugliosi's Helter Skelter, but I would recommend this one instead, just to spice things up a little. Next up, we have One of Your Own, The Life and Death of Myra Hindley by Carol Ann Lee. As the title suggests, this is about the life of Myra Hindley, who is one part of the duo responsible for the Moors murders, along with Ian Brady. Most true crime books tend to be about men, so it's actually very interesting to read about a female killer. The psychology behind it is very different, or at least it's presented as very different. It's why did Hindley stay with Brady for so long? Was she always inclined to kill herself, or was it just a response to being with a killer? Obviously, this book gives no answers to any of those questions, because no one would ever really know the answer apart from maybe Myra herself, but it really makes you think. This book is meticulously researched and so well written, it gave me chills at some points, and the settings of these murders are inherently creepy anyway, the Moors, and this book really seems to capture that in a really graphic way. This isn't one for the faint-hearted though. It does include a lot of graphic descriptions about child murders, and that's not for everyone. The Lost Girls by John Glatt is about the true story of the Cleveland abductions and the incredible rescue of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus. This is a horrifying story about these three girls who are kidnapped, imprisoned and abused in a house for many years by Ariel Castro, and how they miraculously managed to escape alive. This again is a very difficult read. You can't help but remember this is a true story about real girls who went through the worst hell imaginable and came out the other side alive somehow. This book covers everything from Castro's own past and his family life to each of the girls' lives. It's a really well written account of what went on, and I suppose it has a happy ending, which is unusual for a true crime book, or at least as happy as it could possibly be in this scenario. And that's not to be confused with Lost Girls, an unsolved American mystery by Robert Kolker, which is about the crimes of the Long Island serial killer who is still yet to be apprehended, as the title suggests. My video on the Long Island serial killer is actually one of my most popular videos of all time, and most of the information for that video I got from this book. It's written by an award-winning investigative reporter, Robert Kolker, and you can really tell. The way this is written is absolutely gripping to the point where you forget this is a non-fiction book, but this is about real people, real stories. As the title would suggest, this focuses mostly on the stories of the girls, the victims, who are all sex workers. So many people dismiss the crimes of the list for so long because for some reason the life of a sex worker is deemed less worthy than that of others. And it's nice to have a book that treats them as real humans worthy of their full stories being told. If I were to tell you to read just one book in this list, it would probably be this. And finally we have The Radium Girls, The Dark Story of American Shining Women by Kate Moore. I've spoken about this book before, and I know that so many of you have already read it on my recommendation, but this is the true story of the women who worked in radium dial factories, painting watch faces with radium, which we now know to be deadly. They would put the radium paint on their brushes, bring the brush to their mouth to sharpen the tip, before beginning painstaking work. Just hundreds of times a day, ingesting small amounts of radium. They were told that it was entirely safe, but fast forward a few years and these women started to get tumours unlike anything the medical profession had ever seen. Their bones were literally being eaten away from the inside out. This is an absolutely heartbreaking read about the battle these women had to actually get people to pay attention to them. It's just shocking. It wasn't until a man suffered very similar symptoms that any doctor actually began to pay attention. Again, this is so well written, it's won so many awards for good reason. You just want to go back in time and shake these doctors and make them listen. Not your classic true crime book about outright murder, but definitely a crime nonetheless. So there you go, 10 non-fiction true crime books that I recommend you give a read. I've done a video actually on each and every one of the topics covered in these books, so just in case any have piqued your interest, I'll leave links to all of the videos in the description box down below. I don't read much non-fiction, so when I do read or listen to an audiobook, it has to be something that's bloody good, so you can really trust all of these. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you to Surfshark once again for sponsoring. I'll leave all their details in the description box down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!